The next morning, winter's sharp, icy bark cut through the quiet of my den.
Time to start.
The sound sent a shiver through me, and I rose slowly, dragging my paws as I cautiously stepped out. My body slumped, my head hung low. I felt beaten, broken, a shadow of what I once was. Winter, as usual, ignored my behavior entirely. His cold demeanor didn't falter as he barked.
Let's go. We're late.
I nodded silently, falling in line behind him. His pace was steady, deliberate, while mine was hesitant and heavy. As we walked, his voice cut through the silence, calm but piercing.
So,
He said, his words deliberate and almost observational.
you're hurting now. Broken. Defeated. You're just going to give up. Not even try.
The question struck me and my ears flicked back, but I said nothing. My thoughts churned bitterly.
Why do you care? Don't you hate me just as much as everyone else? After all, that is your right.
We reached the place of my first task, and Winter's gaze swept over the area before he turned back to me. His tone shifted, still cold but carrying an undercurrent of wisdom.
Look,
He said, his voice steady.
you can let this mistake, and every other mistake, take you down. Or you can start learning from them and grow.
Something in me snapped. I rounded on him, my anger bubbling to the surface.
Oh, sure.
I spat, my voice sharp with frustration.
Like it's that easy, huh? Just learn from them. Meanwhile, I've got wolves constantly barking at me, pointing out every single thing I do wrong, and you constantly criticizing my every move. Ugh.
My chest heaved as I glared at him.
Don't you understand? I'm clearly not.
My voice faltered, breaking as I struggled to say the word. I lowered my gaze, whispering the word I couldn't bear to speak.
Worthy.
Winter's cold gaze remained steady as he took a step closer, his tone sharp and cutting.
Do you think
He said flatly.
that because you made one mistake, you can't come back from it? That you can't try to be better than you were?
I stared at him, my chest tight, my paws trembling. He continued, his words deliberate and harsh.
If you still feel like this, then go.
His voice turned sharper as he barked the next words.
Go back to the den. Be a waste of space.
The words hit like a blow, and my breath caught as he turned and began to walk away.
I'll be in the clearing when you've had your think on what I've said. Now go.
His bark echoed in the still air, leaving no room for argument. I stood frozen for a moment, his words swirling in my mind. Then, lowering my head, I turned and trudged back toward the den, his sharp tone and cold wisdom weighing heavily on my every step. As I lay in the den, the weight of Winter's words lingered in my mind. Sharp as they had been, they held something I couldn't quite understand. He hadn't boiled over in anger at me, not even when I had dared to lash out in frustration. If it had been Wolfgang, he would have ensured I felt worse. So much worse than I already did. But Winter, he didn't escalate. He didn't berate me for the anger I'd shown. Maybe Winter does care, I thought, my chest tightening. Not the kind of care that's warm or encouraging, but a cold, unrelenting care that demanded I get it right, or not bother at all. It wasn't comforting, but it wasn't cruel either. It was something else. The truth of his words settled over me. I can't keep beating myself up over breaking the rules or making mistakes.
I've got plenty of wolves willing to do that for me. He was right about that much at least.
I stood slowly, my legs trembling slightly as I pulled myself together. The words he'd spoken were harsh, but they had struck something in me.
I can't stay like this. I can't keep letting my failures define me.
A flicker of courage stirred within me, enough to make me take a hesitant step toward the entrance of the den. But as soon as I reached the edge, doubt came rushing in.
What are you going to accomplish?
The voice in my head taunted.
You're nothing. You'll just mess everything up again.
I clenched my jaw, squeezing my eyes shut as I tried to push the thoughts away. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the den, my fur bristling as I began walking toward the clearing. My paws trembled with every step, my heart sinking as the weight of my outburst from earlier came crashing back.
What if he yells at me this time? What if I've made everything worse?
I forced myself forward, my chest tightening with every step. Well, I thought, trying to steady myself.
Whatever the weather may bring, I'll try. I'll try to be a better me.
As the clearing came into view, I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting with nerves. But I kept walking, my steps shaky but determined. Whatever awaited me, I would face it. Winter's cold words still echoed in my mind, sharp but somehow steadying. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe I could try. I reached the clearing, my heart pounding as Winter's piercing gaze landed on me. I braced myself, ready for the inevitable scolding or sharp words that would surely follow. But instead, his expression remained cold and unreadable, as always.
Good.
He said, his tone flat and deliberate.
Let's get started. Afterward, we'll head into the forest for a practice hunt.
The forest. My chest tightened at the mention of it. I hadn't been allowed there since that day, since the mistakes that had confined me to camp. A wave of guilt washed over me, a reminder of how much I had cost the pack. But beneath the guilt, something else stirred. A flicker of determination. I need to get this right. No matter what the task is, I can't fail again. Winter's cold voice snapped me out of my thoughts.
Drills.
He commanded.
The same ones the youngest pups are learning. Start.
My ears burned with humiliation.
The same drills as the pups.
I wanted to protest, but I swallowed the words and nodded. If this was what he thought I needed, then I would do it. I can't argue. Not now. As I started the drills, doubt began creeping into my mind. Winter's sharp commands rang in my ears, but I could feel my paws faltering, my movements clumsy.
What am I doing?
I thought bitterly.
I can't even get this right. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am nothing.
I stumbled, tripping over my own paws, and fell hard onto the ground. Winter's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold.
Again.
I pushed myself back up, my legs trembling.
What's the point?
I thought, bitterness mixing with exhaustion.
I'll just mess it up again.
But I reset the drill anyway, forcing myself to keep moving.
Keep the pace.
Winter barked.
Focus. Follow the commands.
The drills were simple in theory, but the constant pace and unrelenting corrections made them feel impossible. With each mistake, my doubt grew.
Maybe I'll never get it right. Maybe I'm just wasting everyone's time.
I tripped again, the sting of dirt and failure biting into me. Winter's voice followed immediately.
Start over.
The words hit like a blow, and for a moment I wanted to give up.
Why keep trying? I'm just going to fail again.
My paws felt like lead as I pushed myself upright, the doubt weighing heavier than my exhaustion. But then, something shifted. As I stood there catching my breath, Winter's words from earlier echoed in my mind.
You're still here. And that's all that matters. You don't stop. You don't give up.
I clenched my jaw, the doubt in my chest clashing with a spark of something stronger.
I can't let this beat me. Not again.
My paws steadied beneath me, and I reset the drill once more, my movements slower but more deliberate. The commands came again, sharp and relentless, but this time I listened, focusing on each step. I stumbled, but I caught myself, refusing to let the mistake stop me. Winter's bark still followed every misstep, his tone cold and cutting.
Out of sync. Start again.
The humiliation still stung, but determination began to burn brighter.
I will get this right. I have to.
Each correction pushed me harder, but instead of breaking me, they became fuel. By the 10th attempt, my paws no longer wavered and my focus held steady. I could feel the exhaustion in my legs, the burn in my chest, but I didn't stop. Not this time.
I'll finish this, no matter what.
When I finally completed the drill to Winter's satisfaction, my body ached and my fur was damp with sweat, but I stood taller. For the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't in moons. A flicker of pride. Small, but enough to keep me going. Winter's cold gaze lingered on me for a moment before he spoke.
Good. Now again.
I nodded, the determination in my chest burning stronger.
Whatever it takes, I'll keep going.
I was determined. Every step, every command. I was going to get them right. The pups had finished their drills long ago, giggling and tumbling off toward the nursery without a care in the world. They didn't have to worry about perfect timing or flawless execution. For them, it was all about being cute and clumsy, and they got away with it.
Wolf, I miss those days.
I thought, shaking off the creeping self-pity. Back then, I'd aced these same drills without breaking a sweat. I had barely made mistakes, my steps fluid and confident. But now I was starting over, my every move under Winter's sharp gaze. I clenched my jaw, taking a deep breath to steady myself.
Focus.
Swing, I told myself. Just focus. The commands came, clear and relentless, and I locked into their rhythm. My body burned with exhaustion, but I refused to falter. Each step became more deliberate, more precise. The longer I worked, the more determined I became. I wasn't going to let this beat me. Not today. Finally, after what felt like endless attempts, I nailed the sequence. My steps were sharp, my movements fluid, but Winter didn't call it done.
No!
He barked, his voice cold and cutting.
Do it again. 7 more times.
7. I felt the weight of that number settle over me like a stone. But I didn't hesitate. I reset immediately, taking another steadying breath. If that's what it takes, then that's what I'll do. My paws moved like clockwork, each command snapping into place with precision. Step, pause, shift. Again and again. My muscles ached, every repetition pushing me closer to my limit, but I didn't let it stop me. The sting of humiliation from earlier drove me forward.
They think I'm weak, a failure, fine, but not today. Today, I'll show them I'm more than that.
By the 7th flawless repetition, I felt a strange surge of pride. Small, but undeniable. I'd done it. I'd followed every command, hit every mark. Only then did I realize the pups had stopped playing. They were watching me, wide-eyed, their chatter quiet. And just beyond them, Wolfgang stood, his expression unreadable. The realization made my chest tighten, but I stayed focused, waiting for Winter's acknowledgement. Just one word, one sign that I had finally done enough. Winter's cold gaze met mine. His voice was as flat and emotionless as ever.
Good. Now let's go.
That was it. No praise, no encouragement, just a simple dismissal. My tail drooped slightly, but I didn't let it drag me down. Not this time. I straightened my posture and followed him, each step measured but purposeful. No applause, no kind words. But I did it. The thought burned in my chest, small but steady as I walked behind him. And that's enough for me right now. Leaving the camp felt like a victory, however small. The fresh air outside filled my chest, and for a moment, I allowed myself to believe things might get better. The vast openness of the forest just beyond made my heart flutter with a mix of hope and excitement. But, like everything else, that feeling was short-lived. Winter stopped abruptly and turned to me, his cold eyes sharp and unwavering.
I give an order.
He began, his voice cutting through my fleeting joy.
You listened the first time, and you know I'm serious. I'm going to run you through the drill you just practiced. This time, I'm making you work.
I felt my stomach sink, the weight of his words settling heavily on me. Before I could process, he continued, his tone sharp and deliberate.
You have 10 commands to follow. You're allowed 3 mistakes. If you make a 4th, we go back to camp, and you stay in your den as punishment for not listening.
My tail drooped, and I struggled to keep my expression neutral, though my thoughts betrayed me.
Drills? Again? Here at the camp entrance. Not even in the forest like he said we'd go. And if I mess up, I'm confined to my den. He can't be serious.
but one glance at his piercing eyes told me otherwise. There was no warmth, no sympathy, only cold resolve. He wasn't bluffing. My chest tightened as I lowered my head.
What was it he said earlier? Something about listening the first time? Ugh, I should have paid more attention.
Winter's bark cut through my spiraling thoughts.
Get moving!
The sharpness in his tone jolted me into action. I nodded quickly and walked to where he directed. His commands came fast, much faster than they had during practice, and I immediately felt the pressure. My heart raced as I scrambled to keep up, trying to anticipate each move. My paws felt heavy, my mind clouded by the sheer speed of his orders. 3 commands in, I stumbled. My paws faltered and my breath hitched as I tried to recover, but it was too late. I had already failed. I froze, staring at the ground, my chest tightening as shame washed over me. Winter's gaze bore into me, unrelenting. He didn't look disappointed. He didn't look anything at all. That somehow stung more. I realized then that this had been deliberate. He hadn't set me up to fail, not for cruelty's sake. He wanted to see if I had listened, if I understood what it meant to follow orders the first time they were given. His cold demeanor wasn't about kindness, nor was it about breaking me for the sake of it. He wasn't going to let me think I'd earned something I hadn't. No, this was about discipline, about teaching me the hard way. Orders are given. You follow them. Period. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I held them back as I whispered,
I know I messed up, and I know you ordered me to follow the commands. But
My voice cracked and I swallowed hard, forcing the words out.
I'll be honest, I wasn't listening entirely. I was too excited to leave the camp. I'm sorry.
I bowed my head, waiting for the explosion, for the anger I knew would come. But Winter's voice was calm, cold, and unwavering.
Your punishment for not listening is confinement to your den.
He said.
Go!
His words struck harder than any anger would have. I bowed again, my head so low it nearly scraped the dirt, before turning and trudging back toward camp. My paws felt like lead, each step dragging me closer to my shame. My chest ached with the weight of failure, and I couldn't stop my thoughts from spiraling.
Why didn't I pay attention? Why didn't I listen?